Déver Mahasags, Fotterogany, howtogael, lumps of dúinn.
Agus lumps of Louise. La haid the faoina of dúinn. Fair play to you, girl.
I'm telling you, I'm just thrilled to be out of the car because tá baile clia brúta leis an trocht and
oh my God.
Do you know what? Also the heat.
The firm Yuri bocht though.
Oh no, I'm
Sorry,
fully
I
on their
stand with
side.
them. I was beeping at them enough.
I'm fully on their side as well,
Michelin.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, fully on their side. I géisteach le daoine a tuairt aglah agus a caiimmeallar cecho Dakar scoilte just iad haine chiamad a dul leis an cost of living crisis is outrageous.
Yeah, no, it's scandalous. And look, I understand there are people trying to get up and down the roads for cancer appointments. There's obviously eshkachti to every reel. But for the most part, I'm like, go on the farmers, you're making a point.
Yes.
Look what they did in New Zealand. They're after, you know, cutting tax, they're giving people a bit of a break. Yeah. And to be fair, everyone's feeling the pinch. And absolutely, we forget sometimes on Sean Lochlia, it's all go all the time. There are farmers out there that are barely getting by.
100%.
You
yeah,
know?
It's all well and good for us. We can hop on a bike if we need to, but if you're in the back arse of beyond and like it's freezing cold again today as well, if you can't afford to fucking heat your house or put diesel in your car,
bring your kids to school, like you know, it's a real
totally. We need to protest more in Éire Chomá. Like the French, if anything happens in France, they take to the streets. Whereas, and here we are giving out to the poor farmers who are exercising their democratic right as opposed to the fuckers in the Dáil.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway. Oh, beep beep! I was literally passing all the John Deeres. In
run like a deer.
Hybrid electric, and I was like, God, she's far from the country here driving one of those. But I was like, you know what? I come from two families of farmers, and yeah, you'd have to feel for them.
Yeah, totally.
You know, when it's your bread and butter, quite literally.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So look, solidarity, lads. Táimid léamh, Lana Gíirih. Okay, Louise, Hanna ganachud co-ragras isteach on tachtan chicata. So, sorry, I've icked myself out so much at the camping disasters, puking and pissing in tents now, lads. I don't know, but anyway, apparently you can all resonate le seo go baile because Hanna ganachud scéalt isteach. Got my period on a backpacking trip, says the new, and so near Vain, Sutini na Pilini gum, free bleeding in the woods.
I mean,
well, I hope you weren't anywhere where there were bears. That would be scary.
True.
Yeah.
Oh God, I know. There's actually like it's a now awkward position to be in.
I know. Ní Léanrod, ní Smassa, no Shin. Yeah, it's just, I mean, love and light, Hannah to us, fair play. Ken Ella Hannigan, so walking to the toilet constipated in just my PJs, flip-flops, no underwear on. What? Bumped into an ex-situationship and then had to queue for the shitty blocked portaloos with no toilet paper or hand sanitizer.
No, well then get out of the queue, go back and find yourself toilet paper and sanitizer.
Yeah,
also,
God,
though,
I couldn't be dealing a bit constipated now in a portaloo.
Not
Gick.
great.
No, lads, I'm not near my abatoch and co-ragger show. I don't know, without Ken Ellen Sunley.
I know, and it is very much potty humour, but you'd rather be constipated than in the other state of affairs, diarrhea at a festival.
Yeah, you got out of that one light.
You know what I mean? Like it'll be a wadnius massive if you were holding in Rodella.
No.
You know? Okay, Dina Ella Tha Anonymous. To be fair, I've had a lot of camping disasters. Like, why wouldn't you just stop camping then?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Learn from your mistakes.
But the one that stands out would be with a boyfriend. We drove to the Italian Alps one May.
Get a
My
B&B.
first time there. Get a hotel, girl. Treat yourself. You're on holidays. He had been there a few times. We landed in the dark. He had everything. Not to worry, just bring your clothes, he had said. He had absolutely everything sorted. Perfect, I thought. He pitched the tent. We got into our sleeping gear and the rain started.
Oh, no.
Bear in mind, it was a 2-man tent.
no.
He was 6'5".
No, 6'5" man would get me camping as well, in fairness. Okay, I'm coming around to your side of
coming
thinking.
around.
Yep.
We had just 2 bags of clothes for 4 weeks. 4 weeks camping and kayaking.
Good luck.
This sounds like the Bear Grylls. This sounds like I'm a celeb. Get me out of here. You can see where this is going. Every single stitch of clothing I had was drowned wet the following morning. We had to hang all of the clothes around a wood burner in the campsite office. We rented an on-site cabin for the following few nights until the rain stopped. A lovely first week together until the scabies we got from the cabin started itching. Needless to say, the relationship didn't last much longer after we returned home that summer. I don't think I've ever trusted anyone to have anything sorted for a trip since. Now,
no, I draw the line at scabies.
But also, to be fair, would it be a different scenario if it hadn't rained?
Yeah,
he can't control the weather.
Maybe you're being demanding. Do you ever think of that? Do you ever think of that? Sorry, imagine Louise trying to get Louise into a fucking 2-man tent. No,
You
thanks.
wouldn't. None of that would appeal to me. I'm so sorry. Not a single bit of it.
Well, you know, Neil, Deirtar na fo lais ar an rá ach posa, but tá lais eile ar an rá agus sin dul a campáil.
Well,
So there you go. You can have that one for free. Neil lais ar an grá ach campáil. Ar an 8ú lá déag when we in Pigs Lane i Gaeillarna a Chorda. That's this Saturday. So if you want to come, there is a link in our bio. Hopefully there are still tickets there, and yeah, we're buzzing for that. Going to be a good gig.
Doireann's so excited she's rolling yours. This Saturday.
Saturday.
No. I know. Pigs Lane will be great. Percy, don't laugh at the rolling of the oars. It's a real thing. You know that someone means business when they roll the oar on a Saturday. So there you go. And then we have the 8ú. Oh yeah, the big one then, sure. September.
Oh sure, of course, that one.
8ú Derriford, we're going to be in the Ambassador,
Except
which is
it's
great.
October, but yeah,
Crack.
you're dead right.
Sorry,
Yeah,
October.
you're dead right. No, you're dead right.
Do you know what the date of September is though?
What?
My wedding anniversary.
Anna, exciting.
It's always in McCann.
Oh,
There
well,
you
nach
go.
das sin. Okay, Ina seachtain seo Louise, tá mí excited fáilte a churm an bhain seo go dtí set howtogael.
Absolutely. She's got it all going on. A Cork woman, writer and author. She's here to talk about her most recent book, but as Doireann likes to call her, the other Louise.
The other Louise. Maybe my primary Louise. I haven't decided yet.
Well,
Behave yourself now, Louise. We'll see.
Arashim of Uska. Well, a chorda, chuir fáilte for Riv, Louise O'Neill.
Well, the two Louises in my life are finally colliding on the howtogael set.
It's very exciting.
It's
I mean,
very
I feel it's just unfortunate for me that I have to be Louise too because she met you first.
Listen,
I'm always going to be the other Louise.
well, no, you'll actually be one of 3 or 4. Louise McSharry often is
Oh, great.
included in
Yeah,
this
yeah,
bracket.
yeah.
I'm getting even lower
You
down
are-
on the totem
Don't
pole
feel
here.
too special. You see, Louise, I think the bother is that it was such a popular name in the 90s.
Yeah.
Could our parents have done better?
I'm 85, so like I was going to say I
Yeah.
was ahead of the curve actually.
Were you
It was
ahead?
very
of-
chic
yeah.
in 85. It was a very chic name in
Yeah.
85. By the
Apparently-
mid 90s, I'm not so sure.
Not so sure. Well, do you know what? In fairness, Mom wanted Leisha as Gaeilge, and it was Dad who vetoed it. So there you go.
I love the name
Leisha's
Leisha
very
because
nice.
I was in
Yeah.
school, Leisha Ní Nail, and I was always like, oh, Leisha's a
Cute.
really cute
Yeah.
name.
Yeah, it is. Apparently, Louise is the most popular middle name in Ireland.
Oh,
Really?
I
Yeah.
would have thought
Well,
it was
Snooksy
Marie.
it was anyway. That's actually my middle name.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Really?
I'm too want to
Two
burn.
basic names.
I'm going to go to the shop and buy you both a little chain with your name on it, and then you can both get
Actually,
over
have you seen? Sorry,
on.
do you know the way they're doing a TV adaptation of The Testaments, which is the sort of spin-off from The Handmaid's Tale?
Yeah.
Okay.
And someone has done this sort of like collaboration, these massive necklaces.
Go on.
And one of the characters' name is Louise.
Come on.
Oh, perfect.
We'll buy one to share. I'll wear it for the first 6 months of the year, and then I'll post it down to you. When's your
I think
birthday?
we could probably afford
figured
to
it.
buy one each. I don't think they're that expensive, Louise.
But I thought it was going to be a nice friendship thing. It's fine, Louise. I get
sorry,
it.
sorry,
It's
sorry,
grand.
My
sorry.
friend, you're not allowed to rob her from me. You're not allowed to rob her from me. You're flat out on the press junket at the moment.
Yes,
It's hard to nail you down. We were supposed to go for lunch
I'm
earlier.
sorry. I do feel bad about that.
That's
It's
okay.
just been
That's
really-
okay. I'll
yeah.
catch you again. I'll catch you either in
Yeah.
Cork or
But then
in
in
London.
fairness, I did ask you for dinner last night and then you said you had to go to a wake, which
Girl.
was possibly the most Irish sort of like
Yeah.
way to blow someone off.
I did. And you know, we were only talking about this, and I don't know what you're like in terms of going to wakes and stuff, but you always feel, obviously wakes are very emotional, depending on, you know, what proximity you are to the person who died, but you always feel fantastic after going. I drove all the way to Roscommon and I drove back again. I was delighted with myself for going, because it means a lot to people.
Yeah, and I think it's it is such an Irish thing where like a friend of mine in London, like a very good friend of his, like I think a parent died and I was like, oh, are you going to the funeral? Like, you know, or like what are your arrangements for the funeral? And he said, I don't know, like they haven't said it to me whether it's okay for me to come. I thought, that is so strange.
Yeah.
Because in Ireland that would not be a question.
No.
You would be
No.
like on RIP.ie immediately saying,
Oh, totally.
what are the
Yeah.
arrangements?
Yeah.
Well, take us back to Clonakilty and growing up there, because I'd imagine I went to UCC, had a few Clonakilty gals in my year.
Oh,
and like,
oh my God,
it-
we have to.
we
'cause
must, yeah.
compare notes.
Compare
Afterwards, 'cause
notes.
I definitely know them.
You definitely do, but we always knew you and who you were. You were coming up at the time. But I won't give you too many
Superstar?
comments. Just you were a superstar in Cork.
Yeah, oh God.
But we'd go back to Clonakilty. There was a nightclub there, and you'd go like on a mystery tour from UCC back to Clon. What was the nightclub called?
Wait, is it the
was probably
rugby
the
club?
only one, not the rugby club. No, in the middle of the
okay.
town,
Okay, so there was
Sparks
in
or something, like some
God.
stupid name like that.
Oh God. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I think I might have been graduated at that point. That came because I'm sorry. I'm
Well,
just going
I-
to apologise on behalf of the people of Clonakilty.
I always just felt it was a good, like, nice rural culture town, and I would have thought Wakes would have been a big business for you back
Yeah,
there.
Wakes would have been. I mean, Would I say, yeah, I mean, obviously I think I am a culture, yes. I was going to say, would people of Clonakilty like to hear themselves referred to in such a way? It's quite a cosmopolitan place, actually.
And it is.
West Cork is very cosmopolitan.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, I think there was always like...
And by the way, sorry, I mean culture as a term of endearment.
No,
As
I
someone
know.
identifies very
No,
proudly as
no,
culture.
same here, 100%. But I think like West Cork in general, there were so many artists growing up. Like when I was there, like I think there have been so many people who had moved there, probably because of the artist exemption. So there was lots of people who had moved to West Cork who were either artists or they were hippies or they were, you know, just looking for, I think, a quieter pace of life. So there was always a really interesting mix growing up there of like locals and blow-ins and kind of what they would bring to the area. Like I remember when Gwyneth Paltrow said that, you know, basically kind of implying that she had invented yoga or brought yoga to, you know, like, I don't know, the West. Like, yeah, my mom was doing yoga in like the early 90s. Like
That
my
is
sister,
gas.
when she had bronchitis, when she was about 12, was on both, like, my parents took her to an acupuncturist. So like it was always that kind of element, I think, in West Cork. So there was a real mix of, as you said, like country and rural
Characters.
but also
Wow.
this like just influx of, I think, other people with new ideas and new ways of doing things.
That's really interesting. So they
Yeah.
brought for acupuncture in the 90s. Louise has a big Cork GAA tie as well.
Yes.
Go on.
Oh yes, of
We're the
course.
O'Neills.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, my dad was, he played a lot of football and then trained, was a trainer, like a manager and stuff as well. So yeah, I spent my entire childhood sort of by at the side of a pitch.
Go in
Yes.
for Clon.
Yeah, for Clon and for Cork.
Yeah.
And then he played in the 80s. He was sort of back and forth to New York because he was playing for a GAA team there for Donegal, actually.
No way.
There you go now.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
You have big history in fashion, is that right?
Yes.
Was
Yes,
fashion
yes, yes.
always pre-becoming an author, a very beautiful writer?
Thank you.
Were you destined to be a fashionista?
Well, do you know, initially I really wanted to be an actor. So that was what I wanted to be like throughout my entire childhood. Like my mother tells this story of when my granddad had his hip replaced. I think I was about 7, and we went in to visit him in hospital. And I'm sort of sitting on the bed, and the nurse came in, and she was just trying to be nice. And she said, "Oh, you know, what's your name? What age are you? And do you think you'd like to be a nurse when you grow up?" And my mother said I took the lollipop out of my mouth, and I just looked her dead in the eye, and I went, "I'm going to be an actor." And then I asked, like, "Do you want, like, I said, do you want my autograph now?" Like, as in, I say this
my
woman was
God.
like, this child is an absolute nightmare. So yeah, I always wanted to be an actor. And then I think it was probably like, I'd say when I was going to university, my parents were so encouraging and said, "You should, you know, study acting, like, you know, do theatre in Trinity." And I think at that point, I was sort of in like I had developed an eating disorder at about 14, and I think at that point I just knew, I was like, I don't know if I would manage to survive a job or an industry where it's so focused on like what you look like and being on camera and like all of that. Like even because I loved theatre, but I had stopped doing that because I found like the act of like just being in front of people and sort of like being seen in that way, like I found it really triggering. So I kind of put that to bed. And then I suppose I'd always loved fashion, and I did a postgraduate in fashion buying, and then I moved to New York to work as for the senior style director of Elle magazine. So that is where I thought my life was kind of going to go. And I think it's hard, you know, at that age. It's so funny because I was only like 26, but you know, at that age you feel like, oh God, like you're running out of time in a weird way that I don't feel at all now, like at 40. Do you know that? As in, I just don't feel that at all. But like, I think at that age, I was like, okay, I'm in this now, and I've you know, dedicated this much time to it, and I have to kind of continue on, because otherwise I'll have wasted all of this time. But then I don't know. I mean, my visa expired, and I was going to go back to London. I was going to move to London and start working in fashion there. But then my boyfriend at the time broke up with me, and it kind of felt like everything was falling apart. And I just thought, if everything's falling apart and it's going to take me time to rebuild this anyway, it'll take me time, you know, to find a new boyfriend. It'll take me time to like move to London, to get a job, to get an apartment. I may as well just use that time to actually like pursue this dream. Which at the time I'd had the idea for Only Ever Yours when I was in New York. And I just said, look, I'll just take a year. I'll just take a year off, and I'll kind of give this a go, and I'll give it my best shot. And if it doesn't work out after the year, then at least I'll know. Like I'll be like, that's fine. And I'm sure here I am. So, it did work out. But yeah, I think so. Fashion was, but I don't know. I mean, I know when I left for New York, my mother said to me before I left, she was like, do you think this is a good idea? Because like I had been hospitalized at 21 for 3 months with anorexia, and sort of had been sort of, would kind of have a few good months and then would relapse. And so it was always sort of a pretty constant. And I think she was very concerned that like working in an environment like that, where again, the focus would be very much on appearance and what you look like. And I think she didn't think that would be the healthiest environment for me to be in. And my God, was she right. I remember coming home, I left in September and I came home at Christmas and I think I'd already lost like maybe 1.5 stone. And they were just like, okay. I think actually their biggest fear was, how expensive is it going to be if you're hospitalized in the States? How's your health into? They were a bit like, so you have got health, just because they were like, that's going to be insane. So I think they were more, I mean, obviously I'm being facetious. Like obviously they were very concerned. But yeah, so I think that obviously then as well played a part in it, where I was like, I love fashion. And I think the work that you're doing at a magazine like that, when you're working with incredible stylists and, the best designers in the world, and you're making art, like, but I suppose the focus on, bodies and weight and things like that, I just think it wasn't the right environment for me to be in. So yeah, writing where I could just be by myself in my in my pajamas all day, that felt like maybe less confronting in that way. But I still love clothes. Like I still love fashion.
Well, you're such a fashionable girl. But I'm interested in this in that thing you said about feeling like you're running out of time. So I think that resonates with a lot of our listeners, women of a certain age, and to just do so. You were I think you were going through your Saturn returns that time, were you?
Yes, I mean that's kind of late 20s.
Yeah,
I mean it's so weird because I definitely, you always see things like on TikTok where they're like girl math and they're like, you're ancient at 29 but really young at 31. I was like, that is actually very true.
Yeah.
Do you know that way where like 20, like I don't think I ever felt as old as I did at like 26, 27.
Totally.
Which is
I get
so
that.
ridiculous looking back. But I think there was also all of this, pressure to kind of like have everything sorted and like to tick off these milestones. And actually, because when I turned 30, I didn't, I wasn't in a relationship. I didn't have a house. I wasn't, didn't have a baby. I didn't have any of that. But I was doing work that felt like genuinely really fulfilling. So none of that actually mattered.
Yeah.
So actually, I think the thing is that sometimes these external markers that have been set down for us, they seem like, because it's an easier way to like measure your quote unquote sort of success or your progress, whereas actually that's not really what's important. It is, and it was similarly when I turned 40, I was like, I feel like in a really good place in terms of like just who I am as a person, but also like doing things that I feel creatively fulfilled by. And yeah, so do you know what I'm trying to say? That like the external markers that you think are going to make you feel better, actually it's like so much of that is like an internal job and how you're feeling inside.
Totally.
That's such a huge thing on women that, if you're not XYZ by 30, 31, and then, but then you look at like all of these women that you really admire and they're like, oh my God, none of them have followed any of that.
Yeah.
And
I actually think that is the most important thing. Is like, because if you want marriage and kids and a house and things, 100% like put your energy into that and like find that, because like, but if that's not what you want, it is really about being true to yourself and not following, I think, what society, like, and that sounds so easy, like that just, when you say it sounds like the easiest thing in the world, but actually having the courage and also knowing yourself well enough to be like, what is it I want? And that changes, like, isn't that could be very different at 20 to 30 to 40, and you kind of have to keep tuning into it and figuring out what it is that like you want,
And I think as well, it depends on the type of person you are. So I think you're clearly a very ambitious person.
Yeah.
So, has that ambition ever left you?
No, I mean, that is interesting, because in a weird way, I was talking about this with a friend, in a weird way, I feel like the more, because I am very ambitious, and I think it's something that like women
I think it's a great
shy
thing,
away. No, and I don't.
And
mean
I
that
feel
at all.
like that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do, but I actually think strangely, the more emotionally healed I've become, the less ambitious I've become. Not in like I'm still like, there's still this drive to create and to make art that feels meaningful to me. But I think definitely when I was younger, the ambition was more for, I want the success because of the validation that'll give me, and I want that kind of those, again, I think meeting those markers in a different way.
Like an ego thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Whereas actually I think the more that I've sort of like bedded into like really wanting to feel comfortable in my own body with like happy with my choices, feeling like the work that I'm doing is reflecting who I am as a person, and that I'm a good like friend and daughter, and like just, you know, all of those things. Like the more, I suppose, the more I've centered them, the less important some of the outside noise has become.
Yeah, totally. I so get that. I feel like I feel like ambition can be sometimes for a woman like a dirty word, you know.
Yeah.
Like I got married, I got engaged when I was 28,
Yeah.
and I remember being 27, 28 thinking the be all and end all would be, you know, getting engaged, all of this. And then I was married by 30, and I was like in a position where I was actually moving out from my husband geographically, and not like ending the marriage. Being very quick. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm in completely different headspace now than I would have been at 27. So it's really funny, isn't it, that jump from like,
and also all of these things, I think the more that you achieve the things that you want, like as you said, like I really want to be engaged, I really want to get married, and then when it happens, it's like there's like a pleasure in it, but it's very momentary, you know. Then the day is over and you're kind of going on with your life, and it's like how actually it's like the small incremental changes that you can make to find joy in sort of your everyday life. Like that's actually, I think, where the greatest kind of overall happiness comes from, not these like big events, because, you know, the book will come out, you'll have the wedding, you know, you'll do you know, those kind of the things that you think will be the most exciting parts of your life, and then they're over so quickly. So you kind of can't pin your happiness on them because it's so temporary.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm so wise.
It's so true. It's a very good point. Contentment, to have a low level of contentment, as opposed to it's unrealistic to think that you're going to be really happy.
And the thing is with the low level of contentment is that that's everyday work, and it's like kind of the smaller like things that you do, like, okay, I'm not going to turn my phone on for half an hour in the morning, or I'm going to read for an hour before I go to bed, or like, you know, those kind of things. I think to
the
like
boring things.
Sure.
Totally.
Exactly. Eating well, getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
It's really annoying how much it works.
It's so
like
annoying.
go to the gym and go to bed early, and you're like, oh, it doesn't
I know.
work.
Kick the booze. Oh, I know.
But I'm interested in that payoff between, okay, obviously, you know, being an ambitious woman and having, you know, things you want to do, then at the same time creating art, right? And then there's this juxtaposition, because 100%. It's like, how do you make something that's real to you, but also that, you know, you don't want to be making something just for commercial success, but you need commercial success. So what's the...
it's a constant, I mean, it's such a great question, because it's such a constant balance, because, you know, yes, you know, I am a bit of a, like, I would describe myself as a champagne socialist.
Perfect.
So, like, you know,
your sister here,
So, you know, I like nice things, and those things cost money, and, you know, it's like, so obviously, and, you know, this is my job. I don't have, you know, like, I don't have family money, like, you know, it's like I'm taking care of me, so like I have to like make enough money to support myself, so that obviously is important. And also I like to be read, and you know, I know that like when people talk about commercial fiction, like I think this you know, Whatever Happened to Madeline Stone is probably the most commercial book that I've ever and we talked about this when, because you messaged me after you read it, and I was like, I just wanted to write a banger. And like, so it is that, like, but then also I suppose, as you said, wanting to create work that, like, I don't know, that does feel meaningful, or that I'm enjoying creating it. And it is such a tricky balance. And like, I think the way when art meets like capitalism is always tricky. Like I went to see Nan Golden. I'd never seen the exhibition. It's a ballad of sexual dependency, and I've been obsessed with those photos for years, but I'd never seen the collection as a whole. And it was really interesting because, you know, a lot of them are taken during the 80s, and it's this very gritty aesthetic of like artists in downtown New York, and you know, it's a lot of queer culture, and you know, she's photographing a lot of her friends who were, you know, dying of AIDS, and like, you know, so it's just this, as I said, this incredibly gritty aesthetic. And I was looking at it and I thought that's so interesting, because the equivalent of a Nan Golden today, the aesthetic that she would be capturing would be so glossy, because the way in which I think, like in the 80s and the 90s, kind of that Gen X attitude of like, you know, never sell out, you know, like that like, you know, if you're making art, you like the glorification almost of like the starving artist, like that really doesn't exist anymore. Like, you know, people are not impressed by that. It is like people are more, and now it's like money, success, how much, you know, like how much are you making? Like it's really interesting, I think, to sort of see that shift, and like that at that time that art and capitalism were really seen as, I think, much more separate things than they would be today. So I don't know if that really answers it. I mean, I'm always kind of grappling with that because, as I said, I want to make money.
I think it's
you know, that's totally fair. But I think even, you know, your first book. Oh, sorry, no, Asking for It wasn't your first book.
Asking
it
for
was
It's
your
my second
book.
yeah.
But that book was such an important thing for our generation in terms of the messaging and consent. And you're allowed. Not every fucking book you write has to be this, you know, dissection of. You're allowed to write something that is fun and escapism.
Thank you. Yeah, because I couldn't. I mean, I had, you know, I had actually written a book before this one. So I should have had a book out in 2024. So I'd written a book. We'd gone through 2 rounds of edits. It was sort of loosely based on the Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein story. And it just got to a point, and I know I was kind of going through a pretty hard time in 2023 anyway, but I was like, I just can't write this book. It just felt, every time I went to it, I just felt so, it was just so dark. And I think maybe the world can feel like a very dark place, but like touching into that kind of aspect of the world and of society, and like trying to think about those stories, it just made, I was like, I can't stay in this world. It's just, I'm finding it too difficult in my body to actually just stay with this. So when I started writing this, though obviously there are elements, you know, I think it's very much looking at the sort of dark underbelly of fame, but it did feel fun. And I think, you know, it was fun. But when I was writing it, like, you know, I have a memoir coming out in September, so I was whilst I was writing this, I was in the middle of the research, as we'll call it, for the
sifting through the archives.
I was in the middle of the research, and that was so fun, and I was like just like on such an adventure, and I felt so free and sexy and alive, and I just like honestly just felt so in my body that I think that couldn't help but like bleed into the book, where it, like, even the ending of it's very hopeful, because I do think that element of hope is so important, because I think without it we just sort of fall into apathy. And right now it's really easy to do that because the news cycle is coming at us so quickly, and it's all like really like chillingly disturbing, like a lot of what's happening. And I think we're becoming so desensitized to it because it's happening so quickly, and because the news cycle is so fast, that I think it's really easy to just tip into, well, sure, look, what, I can't do anything. And I think once we lose that sense of hope that actually the world can change, the world can improve, I think we've lost a part of our humanity, actually.
Yeah, it's really sad. I know. I'm obsessed with, to bring it back to positive things, you feeling like that. I think there must be nothing better in the world of being a creator than feeling like you're in the flow state and feeling that, like, to feel sexy. What a great feeling. Yeah. Because, you know, I feel like when you work in anything creative, and the more successful you become, the harder it is to feel that often, maybe because you start to become more critical of yourself.
Oh, 100%. And I'm sure you must feel this, like, well, maybe you don't, but like, you know, when you're having to be in front of the camera and you're like, you become, well, maybe, again, I don't want to speak for you, but I think it's really easy to become sort of very like hyper fixated on like,
totally, and you lose the like the naive sexiness that you had when you were starting into it, and the passion. So how did you, I want to know how you get into that flow state, or how you felt.
Stay off cameras. I don't know if that's going to help you, Louise.
No, go on. No,
shut them off, man.
Well, I'm going on a holiday for 10 days that I'm very excited for. So
and I'm trying, I think, not to, because it is the kind of need to, like, and I was off social media as well, so it is the kind of need to document it, actually just being in your body. And I think the problem is that, like, you know, with, and look, I'm not like against social media, but like, I think it is the documentation, it is the taking photos. You're very much sort of like, how does that look, rather than how does it actually feel. And I think once you sort of ground into that, into like how you feel, like, it's really powerful, that, you know. And it's funny how that, I remember I was at this I go to these women's circle, I know, so again, West Cork hippie, I know.
Sign me up.
And we were on
it
was fab. But we were I was talking to this woman, I think it was just before, I can't remember, it was last May, and they had, you know, she'd asked like, what's your association with summer? And one of the women said to me, she was like, oh, you know, I hate summer because of like wearing a bikini, and like, you know, I thought that's so interesting, because as soon as she said, what do you associate with summer? I was like, oh, sex. Like, I just thought like summer is such a sexy season. And like, and I thought, oh, like, it's just, I don't know, I think like that is so much about perspective, but like not about like what does my body look like in a bikini, but like how I feel in my body in the summer when it's warm, and I'm sort of like, I always say this, like when I'm like, let's say a hot summer's night, it's in London, I'm wearing like, you know, whatever, like jeans and a top, and I feel like soft and slow. That's the only way I can describe it. Like I feel fully present in my body and sort of soft and slow.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm aiming for.
And
Wow.
that's class and very aspirational. I would love to get that. So how do you, like, what was it? Do you remember it? Because I don't know, did you always feel that way?
No. I mean, because I think like that was a real process, because I mean, I'd had an eating disorder for 17 years. So like there was no sort of like pleasure in my body. Like, do you know what I mean? And I just...
Sure,
I kind of wanted to feel like a floating head and sort of like pretend that it didn't exist. And then, you know, so I think I spent so much of my 30s like recovering, and then, you know, I went through this really bad breakup, and then I started doing a lot of work with a somatic therapist. And because I had gone so far with talk therapy, and my therapist said, she said, you know, you're so good at this. Should you come in? And she said, you've thought about everything and you've written out, you know, you journal every morning, and you know, you're able to go, this happened and I can relate it back to this. But she said, you're not in your body. And she said, that you cannot get into your body through talking. So this is kind of as far as we can go. She said, if you want to like fully recover, she said, the next step is really like tapping into that. And that is what somatic therapy is. It's like, because it's also about like trusting your instincts, because I think anyone will sorry, I hit the mic there. Anyone I think who's been through a breakup will have that feeling of like, oh, why didn't I listen to my gut, or I didn't trust my instincts, or and kind of like you lose faith in yourself. And that's probably the hardest part of it, I think. And like really rebuilding that afterwards was like, how does my body feel when I go on a date with someone? Am I feeling anxious? Is there if I'm feeling butterflies, what's that about? Like, so it was really actually just beginning to listen to my body again. And that took like a couple of years to like really like, and that's still something I'm like, I take like the nervous system regulation and trying to like ground into my body. Like that's probably like my number one job every day. Like that's because it's the hardest thing for me, and it's the most important thing. So that's the thing that I'm like every day going, okay, how am I going to be in my body today? How am I going to like kind of settle into that?
That's kind of like not overthink and just
because I am such a thinky person.
I
am.
feel
that's kind of part of the job, and like, you know, I am like, and I always have been. And it's like really trying to again just be like, how do I feel rather than what am I thinking?
Yeah.
I've meant to ask you for a long time about your morning pages ritual.
Oh yes.
And tell you
yes.
swear by them.
Yes, I do. So when I came home from New York, I had sort of said I really wanted to, like, I was like, I'm going to write this book. And then got very distracted just by life. And I think as well, like procrastination really is fear in action. Like I think there was this sense of, I'd given myself the year, and I thought if I write it and it's terrible, or if I write it and I can't, you know, it doesn't get published, I'll have to sort of live with I suppose that failure. Like that's kind of what it felt like, and that felt like it would almost be a death. Like it would be easier to be like, well, if I did write a book, it would be amazing, but you know, not actually have to be, I think, which is every day with writing, you're confronted with your own limitations, and you're confronted with sort of how far your abilities can go, and that's challenging. But yeah, so I came home and I was in the library, and a book had fallen out of the like off the shelf, so I just picked it up, and it was called The Artist's Way. And I had never heard of this book before, but it's a really famous book to sort of unblock creativity. It's a 12-week program. And one of the main tenets of it, well, there's two. One is that you go on an artist date every week. You take yourself to like an art exhibition or a play, but you have to go by yourself. Or like a pottery class, or, you know, something like that. And then the other thing is morning pages. So as soon as you get up, you'll write like 3 pages. And it's really interesting, like, because you'll sort of see the same things coming up time and time again. And like there have definitely been periods where I've stopped writing them, and they're always the periods where there was something happening that I didn't want to face. There was something going on that I didn't want, because I knew if I faced it, I'd have to make a decision, because it just comes up. Like it's because it's the first thing that you do when you wake up. Like it's kind of this very unfiltered access to your subconscious, because you're not really allowed to think too much about it. It's supposed to be like real sort of stream of consciousness. So it's really interesting to see the things that will come up.
Tell us about the new book.
Okay, so the new book, Whatever Happened to Madeline Stone. Well, you've read it, Doireann.
I've read it. I put this on my Instagram story, but I'll say it again. Me and Louise had an absolutely insanely wild night before Christmas at Kneecap, right? And this is how good the book was. It was one of those hangovers where I couldn't keep anything down. I was sick as a dog. I couldn't look at my phone, but I was so bed into the book and I just had to finish it.
Oh,
so I plowed on through.
That is honestly,
yes,
because you did look very unwell. I will say.
No, I was in the horrors.
I mean, you were always kind of glowing, but maybe it was sweat. I'm not sure. But
yeah,
it was you were like, I was like, oh, she looks great, but it could be sweat. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, no, it was.
Oh,
it
thank
was definitely the sweat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I mean, okay, so it's it is about twin sisters who, when they're very small, their mother goes to a psychic, and the psychic tells her that one of the twins is going to become the most famous woman of her generation, and the other one is going to die before her 30th birthday, but she has no idea which twin is which. And then so the mother is like a real like prototypical sort of stage mother, so she like, you know, moves them to LA, gets them into beauty pageants, starts them on commercials, and then they land sort of a Disney show, kind of like an Olsen twin style show on a channel like the Disney Channel, and then the role comes up, so it's going to be sort of like the OC, like the biggest, you know, show of the early 2000s, and both twins go for it, and Chelsea gets the role, and she does go on to become the most famous woman of her generation, but then Maddie disappears well before her 30th. So, and then in present day, which is 2025, Chelsea is now married to like this tech billionaire, and this storage unit is discovered that has like all of Maddie's belongings and her personal records. So for the first time in almost 2 decades, Chelsea's like, maybe she'll find out what actually happened to her sister.
Amazing.
Yeah.
No, it's a really, really great read and a great bit of escapism. It's the perfect summer read, actually.
I think
really,
so.
isn't it?
I think, and even the cover, I feel like is very like,
Lovely
you know, that
covers.
kind of beach read.
For sure. I think this is one for you now, Lou.
Well, I'd absolutely love it. I feel like it's right up my street. Do you think you'd ever go down the route of like, I'm seeing Marion Keys on the front here calling you sexy and fascinating? How lovely. Would you ever do as she's done with the Walsh sisters and turn something into a Netflix show or a movie or a series?
They've all been, I mean, it's
this kind of sounds like it has it written all over it.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because they've all been, except for this one hasn't yet, but like the rest of them have all had the TV and film rights have been bought, but it just moves at such a glacial pace.
Oh, really?
God, okay.
Yeah, it's funny. And they like, Only Ever Yours and Asking for It are probably the two that have gotten the closest, and they've been like so close. I remember with Only Ever Yours, they were nearly ready to start filming, and then COVID happened. And then it was sort of, you know, things fall apart in people's schedules.
Yeah.
So like, it's just one of those things where like, it would be so nice if it happened. Because like, I remember the stage adaptation of Asking for It was like incredible. Like, it was just it's just a really strange experience seeing things that like, you know, you've created in your head, like, you know, on stage. So I can't even imagine what that would be like on screen. But I don't know, I suppose because books are my first love.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I definitely would be interested in writing for TV. A friend and I are sort of playing with something at the moment, but that's not like, when I write the books, I write them to be read. Do you know, like, so if something happens afterwards, that's amazing, but that's kind of not my primary focus when I'm going into it.
Yeah.
Well, we'd definitely back a Madeline Stone adaptation, because it does read quite like that. You know, you're
and we
mixing
you know,
the
it'd be
world.
so meta as if we could get the Olsen twins to.
Oh my God!
Wouldn't that just be
Amazing.
perfect?
Yes. Well, Louise is obsessed with the Olsen tuck at the moment,
You know the
so
way
that
they
would
tuck
be.
the hair
yeah.
something,
They're so
It's so
cool.
glam,
They're
isn't
so
it?
They're
glam.
just they just have it. Do
They
you know?
really do.
They
They
just
do.
have such a natural sense of style, and it's so interesting with, because even, you know, you'll see like Zendaya is a great example, because I think she also has it, whereas you see people even when they're styled, like, because you know, what's his name, I can't think of his name now. Law.
Jude Law?
Yeah. No.
know.
Yeah, her stylist.
Oh, hairstylist. Yeah.
Why my brain is gone.
And I know who you're talking about. They did the tennis ball shoes for Wimbledon.
Yes,
and for the
but he's incredible. But he's working with Jeff Bezos' wife at the moment.
really?
And you're like, it doesn't matter how good the style. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you kind of
yeah.
you either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
And the Olsen twins just
They have it.
Yeah, they have it.
Yeah.
They can do it. Yeah. But Louise, I know you're on a little bit of a journey for láthar leis an Gaeilge.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Now, I won't embarrass myself by saying anything on the pod, but so I like, my dad went to a Gael school and like really loved Irish, and my sister is a primary school teacher, so, you know, would always sort of be sprinkling a few words in. But like, my uncle married a woman from Ballyferter, and I think it was 10. So her family, I mean, they didn't learn English until they went to school. Like her, you know, like that was kind of like, was really like, you know,
Hardcore.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think I just always had this real grow for the language, and you know, really enjoyed it in school and did really well in my leaving cert, and then just kind of completely forgot about it. And I've definitely tried, I think over the last number of years, the more I've started to, I suppose, really think about colonialism, to be honest, and trying to sort of colonize myself, and like, and then really beginning to think about like the impact that loss of language has had. I'm so envious of people like you know, who have been like just brought up with it, because like you're really like, and not to like belabor the point, but like you're really the guardians of it now. Like it's like this real responsibility almost that you're like, we have to like, and even doing the podcast is like such an important thing to kind of keep that alive. But because I've been spending so much time in London, you know, a friend of mine over there is English and was raised in England, but his grandparents are from a Gaeltacht in Donegal. So he speaks like, you know, it's quite funny because he's, you know, quite posh English accent, and then speaks Irish with like this, like the most Donegal Ulster accent you've ever heard. So I did think, I cannot be shamed like this by an Englishman. Like the fact that he speaks, you know, better Irish than me, I just felt like was like really damning, and I just felt like really like almost embarrassed, because his, you know, friends were also like, oh, how's your Irish? I was like, it's terrible. So I've started doing like, you know, just some online classes and just trying to like just use like, you know, the odd focal wherever I can, because I do genuinely think it's just so important that we kind of hold on to our culture. And when I see, you know, sometimes you'll see articles where they're like, sure, it's not that important, and why are we putting money into Irish, and you know, it's just a way, and you're like, we're like, it's losing a part of ourselves, and like a part, and I always think that is particularly as a writer, because language is so important to me, there is always this sense of I am always writing in a language that's not my own. And like just when you really think about that, I think it's really sad.
Incredibly sad. But I'm also really interested, well, there's levels of this, because it's identity, and I suppose but you're a friend in England who was brought up in England but of Irish heritage, and how important that identity is to them.
Hugely important. Which I find really interesting. You know, that like, I suppose that it's almost more important than someone who I think grows up in Ireland and takes it for granted. Do you know, that he's really into, you know, Irish language and plays GA in London, and I think it's just I just have found that really interesting, and it's really, I think it really inspired me. I was like, okay, I can do this as well. Like I grew up in Ireland. I grew up around Irish speakers. I studied Irish in school. There is absolutely no reason why I can't have I don't think that I'll be fluent, but that I can't have like a basic conversational level of like my own language.
Totally. Con Houlihan, the great writer and journalist, had a great phrase about how the Hiberno English is woven on the loom of the Irish language. And when you're writing yourself, do you find the Hiberno English, the constructs?
And it's interesting, because a lot of the times I won't notice it, and then my copy editor will say, I don't know what this means, or this syntax isn't quite isn't quite right, and sometimes that's fine, because obviously, let's say with the whatever happened to Madeline Stone, that's set in America, so there can't be any Hiberno English in it. But you know, with my memoir that's coming out, I did have to say, this is how I speak, and this is very much in my voice, and like there was a, you know, I suppose a little bit of a, you know, because I had used mom, which is very common in Cork and Kerry, because you know, it's like a vom, and you know, so that's what my sister and I would have always called our mother, and you know, so there was a little back and forth of, oh, do you mean mum? And I was like, no, mom. I mean mom.
You'll need to write a Cada Horla de Vor in your Ian, or You'll have to set a book in the Gael.
Is going to be on Squelga. Imagine, I started off and I just wanted to have a conversation, and now I'm like, my next novel is going to be
and there's a grant in that.
Yeah.
Well, táimid anna bhuíocht Louise as chat
thank you so much for
mar an hanna bheas an chat for play. Chat úntach an son le Louise O'Neill, she's great, isn't she?
Galing.
I know.
Galing. Can I do a dteagmháil now in winter Canuck na chuala, they'll all be, I'm like, girls, Louise O'Neill, they'll be starstruck.
Oh my
Heish na blianta.
It's a shame really das. Will I an glúise got nagar féile Reintlech and Colleen
Oh, absolutely. Cada bhí mar gglaart faoi. A bheith croch.
Anava. Croch.
Creative.
Yes.
Cadella Vishiora.
Eva Kirp, a gore body image.
Yes.
Sin can ma. Couple can eile beidir gnáthab, size habit, no routine. Morning pages. I'm mí the year going her in the morning pages. Lehannig Madne. lehannig maidne.
That's
Agus,
a no sé sin actually.
yeah, se.
Agus ag déanamh an machnamh.
Yeah.
She Harvey grounded. I love the idea of the somatic grounding.
There you go.
You know, it's great, isn't it? We could all take a couple of nods. Oh, Louise O'Neill.
Yeah, will éan jopsach siachs na seachtainna go doing?
Well, I think the yak na shachtana is the price of diesel. Come on. We
Yeah,
said that
oh
at the
my
top of the
God.
episode. Boo. Yak.
Yuck.
Figure it out, government. Daniel's
Fuck
far.
me.
I know. Yup na shachtana.
Yup na seachtainna is multivitamins, guys. They do work and they do age you backwards, apparently. Sin a Doireann Instagram algorithm lum, so caithfidh gúil sé fíor.
Well, Sinead, that and táimid ag dul little trust bóthir ag an deir seachtainna bemúid a gurcaig agus a bemúid i galorna. So I tell you what, West is best. I've often said it, and we're having a big old Westy weekend. So
Woohoo.
my yup is going to be see ya either in Killarney Friday night or
Ba mí gailteach fú scrí.
Come
You know,
on.
so to sorry, we're in Clarny, day Saharing.
Go leis Gael.
Agus ha mí gailteach fú scrí. I don't know if there's any tickets left for that, but day hína, ba mí gailteach imú scrí, áit gur bas dom winter hain, so size homecoming dumsa.
Yeah, agus tá tú bortha the scéalt ar fád ancient.
Oh, right, they'll be getting the sanitized, sanitized version of gachard because ba me gailteach le gach ile din is a fucking lucht féchane. But anyway.
Doireann, I don't know why you thought it was a good idea bringing me back there. Like, do you think that I'm going to keep my club doing the
God love us, right? If we're still here in Tachtan Schuing, lads, it'll be a
miracle
miracle.
to be, yeah.
Okay, slán.
Slán.